Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So today we're going to be talking about applicant screening mistakes that could kill your business. And on today's webinar, some of the things that we're going to cover is we're going to talk about the top 10 applicant mistakes. These may be things that you are aware of, some things that you may not be aware of, or things that maybe you've done really well in the past and maybe haven't paid as much attention to right now. And then we'll also talk about some industry updates that we felt were really important to share with you. So I am going to be your moderator for today's webinar. My name is April Gowdy. And then we have Mike Stout, who will be our host today. And so he'll be sharing with you all of his great wisdom about the different things that you can do to make sure that you stay compliant and that you save yourself some time and some money during the applicant process. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Mike to go ahead and start sharing with us about the applicant mistakes that could possibly kill your business.
Thanks, April. I don't know about great wisdom or whatever you said, but I'll do what I can. I've certainly been doing this a long, long time. So everybody, welcome from wherever you're calling in from. Good to talk to you, and look forward to getting to do this more often than we have been. So again, this part of this webinar is kind of some of these slides are incredibly simple, but if you don't do them, if you don't think about doing them, they'll kill you. So with that, if you have some questions, April, I think they have a way to type in a question if they have something. Is that still true?
Absolutely. So yes, you can definitely type your question into the chat box, and I will take a moment to get that question to Mike so that we can get it answered.
Okay. And folks, feel free to do that any time. We can we'll work it into how this is going to go. So this is not a sit and listen to monotone professor talk. So anyhow, with that, let's get started, April. So this is probably one of the two most important steps or pieces of the puzzle you can ever do, and that's to create screening criteria. Screening criteria, much like if you're going to hire someone, you've got requirements what that applicant has to have to be employed by your company. These are kind of like requirements to rent from you. You know, things like verifiable legal source of income, things like that. You know, how long have they been where they say they have 3 times the rent is the standard amount of rent that folks want to see, but I've seen and personally worked with 4 times the rent and even 2 times the rent. Those are different circumstances, but you know, those are things to think about. And what are your disqualifiers going to be? We'll talk about this a little bit later. We used to say, I will not accept felons, something that you shouldn't do anymore. And you can go ahead and do it, but just be ready for that knock on the door and it's HUD. So they don't like that. But we'll get into that a little bit more and some of these other things. But if nobody has any questions about that particular piece, in some states, incidentally, this is not just a suggestion; it's a law. So might as well just do it. Let folks know what you're looking for before you give them the application and take their application fees. All right, another one. Really simple, but you'd be surprised. You know, why doesn't the applicant, why do they scratch out their social? Why do they forget their landlord's name? Because you know as well as I that at 3 o'clock in the morning, if a pipe breaks and the apartment or the house is filling with water, they know who to call, or they'll figure it out very quickly. So these are the kinds of things that you want to make sure that that you've got on the rental application, and you can also read it. Years and years ago, just to date how long I've been doing this, we would we'd get applications sent over to us faxed, and we couldn't read anything. So we'd call the client and say, hey, I can't read this. You know, could you send it again? And they said, well, we can't either. We hope that you'd be able to see it, to be able to read it, you know, through the fax. Well, even through scanning these days, the quality of the images doesn't get better. Just at least with the technology that I work with, just doesn't get better. Anybody 18 years of age or older needs to fill out their own individual application and just compare the applications to look for inconsistencies or even consistencies. So those two steps, follow those two main steps, and you're well on your way to beginning the screening process and finding your those great renters we're all looking for. This is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. We're hearing we had a situation last week even where we had a gentleman completely, our client, one of our clients had a gentleman completely fabricate an entire identity along with license, social security card, you name it. It was all fraudulent. Employment, rental history, the whole entire thing was fraudulent, and that got now with law enforcement. But it's happening more and more. So when you're seeing their picture IDs, look at them. They look legitimate. You know, there's ways, and different states have different means to confirm whether or not they're legitimate, but you can kind of just look at them and tell. If you're getting photocopies, look closely at those photocopies. It's you can almost always tell there's been some kind of if it's been doctored in some way. You can almost always tell. If it looks flat, probably doctored. They always have depth to them. And credit freeze is becoming a bigger thing as well. Folks are getting smarter, and they're trying to protect their credit from fraud. But they're forgetting they've done this, and then when they go in to apply for your rental property, their credit's frozen, so we can't do anything, and no one else can do anything either with a frozen credit file. So something to look for. It's not necessarily a red flag, but it most certainly is a flag. Some of the important things to note on a picture ID: government issued. Some government should issue it. Spelling of names, date of birth. Oftentimes, you'll find the correct date of birth on that government issued ID card. So those are important things to know. And also, some states have, in Arizona, for example, if you've got a license that expires 1 year after it's been issued, you're most likely dealing with a sex offender of some sort. So there's some other states that have similar regulations as well. So I don't know where folks are calling in, but it's something to know. You'd be surprised how many times I've gone in and taught a class to professionals, and they have no idea. Even in Arizona, where it's a big deal with the licensing, they don't know what that means. So point being is just know your laws and know things like this. Work with, find some education somewhere. Well, some of the favorite stories we've heard over the years, and we should. There's a lot to type, but we should put out anybody listening want to share a story or type it in. April can read it. This is a great time, or unmute you and let you share. I don't know, but anyhow, these are some of the best ones we've had over the years and we've collected. My social security card was stolen by aliens who probed my brain. The eviction wasn't really me. I was just staying with my mother, brother, sister, boyfriend, aunt, whoever it was. If the eviction action, if you're named in the action, guess what? You were a part of the lease. So know that. The other one is finally, I've always lived with my parents. Mike, you're 45. No, you haven't. And the one thing I want to mention there is I'm not making fun of it in any way, shape, or form. Folks that end up being adult children and must stay with family members for their life. It's not a joke at all. I'm talking about people that are lying about where they've lived, and I just want to bring that up, make sure everybody knows I'm trying to poke fun at something that's not funny. No one wants to share?
Nope, no questions at this time, Mike.
People. All right. And again, if your applicant's got a wonderful story, they pull up an U-Haul, they've just burned down their a landlord's house. They're a little sooty. Slow them down. Anytime somebody's in a big urgent time to move, got to move, there's a reason for it. So slow them down, slow the verification process down, slow it all down. You'll know pretty quickly, or you should know with your screening company, you should know pretty quickly whether or not you ought to move to maybe the next phase of screening, being, do we need to verify employment? Do we need to verify rental history? Is this guy being evicted? Is this gal being evicted? Those are things you should know pretty quickly. But again, if they show up in a U-Haul and they've got a handful of cash, chances are something just happened, or they're running away from their last landlord. They're skipping out, and that big wad of cash is actually owed to the current landlord. They're going to give it to you so they can do the same thing to you, and down the road. So this has become, every screening company out there says they are out gathering eviction files from the courts directly. And this has become a really, really big deal today, because as of July, judgments are no longer reported on the credit files. Nowhere, none of them, all three of the bureaus made this decision kind of together, kind of simultaneously, but there just became too much risk. And so they're not doing that anymore. And a lot of screening companies in the past would reverse engineer, and that's probably the wrong word, but that's what I'm going to use, would reverse engineer the judgment they found on somebody's credit file and make it look like they had the eviction filing as well. And they can't do that anymore. So now they're losing that ability to show eviction files. So now they've had to go another route, trying to buy old data from third-party screening companies. So you want to find a screening company. This is my point. You want to find a screening company who's actively in the court systems across the country, gathering eviction filings as their file and following them all the way through to the judgment process. Excuse me. That's something that is invaluable, and it's important to have. So if you're using a company like NTN, my shameless plug, for the most part, we're out there gathering evictions across the country daily and every day. So if you filed on somebody tomorrow, chances are we're going to be able to tell you the next day. Excuse me, if you file today, we'll tell you tomorrow. In many cases, most cases. So we still collect the judgment information because we're in the courts. Obtain your applicant's credit or decision point report. Again, eviction history does not, it never did appear on the credit report, but judgments don't anymore either. And so some folks get confused with judgment and an eviction, but again, no longer do you see either one of them. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, they remove tax liens as well. Those don't necessarily affect our industry as much as judgments do, but they're no longer there as well. And if you have questions about that, go look at your reports and see that they truly are gone. Many of our customers, in fact, because of liability issues and some other things, use our report called Decision Point. And Decision Point provides an analysis of the individual's credit, along with their combined with that the eviction history and some other pieces of that same puzzle, without the liability of having the entire credit report with it. So it's a wonderful tool. If you haven't heard of it, if you're not using it, you should give it a look and see what you think of it. But other things like bankruptcies and foreclosures, you'll see those as well. And anyhow, just why should you get credit, and what's it help you do? Criminal history. This used to be simple. We would say, excuse me, we would say, well, if you've got any kind of a felony conviction, I'm not renting to you. Now, if you say that, you're going to get a knock on the door from HUD or a phone call from someone letting you know you've been served. So that happened in April of 2016. There were a few cases in Texas, but one in particular ended up going to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said, you know what, we do kind of feel like this disparate impact is a real thing, and based on that, if it's real, and we feel like it could be, here's how you prove it's real. And disparate impact basically is inadvertently affecting a protected class when you didn't mean to do it. That's certainly not a legal term, but it's when you've potentially hurt some protected class when you never meant to do it. You weren't trying, and it's just so things we should do now when we're first of all, if you're allowed to order criminal reports, and some states are pushing that we shouldn't be able to use criminal activity or convictions against our applicants any longer. We should just rent to them anyway. But what should you do if you've got somebody? Back to that screening criteria, you really need to break down. We joked about this in the past, but what's a good crime versus a bad crime? Usually crimes that are violent crimes are probably the worst kind of crimes. And just think back and kind of put them together and think, okay, well, first of all, know how long your state reports criminal activity. Some states go as far back as the conviction, and some states, 14 or 15 of them go back 7 years. Texas is one of those. I think I heard we had some folks on here from Texas. Arizona is go back as far as we can go to get records state. Lots of the states around Arizona and also lots of states around Texas are 7-year states as well. So anyhow, know that. If you don't know that, contact your screening company. Your screening company should know that information. So just know that there's changes that are happening all across this country. And if you've got any other questions about that, or you think it's something down the road, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to connect you with the right NTN officer just to answer your question if I can. So. John Smith. If you've been screening applicants for a while, you've come across somebody named John Smith or one of the other really common names out there. And most screening companies do what we call data dumping. And you can imagine if your applicant is named John Smith and you've got 45, 50,000 John Smiths, they really have no way of knowing who your John Smith is. And so you get 17 pages of possible evictions or 27 pages of here are John Smith criminal records across the country. So we call that data dumping, and it's something you should be careful with as well. You should be able to go to your screening company, and your screening company should be able to say to you, guess what? We have a process in place that allows for us to report just your John Smith and not 17 pages or 10 pages or even 4 pages of guesses. It's something to make sure you're staying away from. That's something to think about. If we all agree that all screening companies operate the same way, and we don't, screening companies don't operate the same. But if we agree that they do, look for a company that offers some kind of a quality assurance or some kind of a review process to eliminate all those extra pages of not your applicant, and just gives you what your applicant has done or hasn't done. So that's a big thing to be out there looking for. Middle names, of course, help. But again, just think of John Smith if you've been screening enough. I think I saw a commercial over the weekend that talked about a John Smith and how many there are and how troubling it is. But just think about screening and what you got versus whether it was or wasn't your applicant. It doesn't have to be John Smith, but just think about that. Oh, the verification of employment and residency. These days, you call HR, they'll tell you what they can tell you, or they'll give you the work number's telephone number and their company code, or some other third-party operation. More and more today, when you're verifying employment, get pay stubs. Pay stubs are an easy way to confirm that the individual is employed, what their actual pay is, because oftentimes HR can no longer answer that question. But these other third parties, I wouldn't personally, the work number is the most commonly used one, the largest one by far, but not necessarily worth the 35 or 45 bucks additionally they want you to pay just to find out that, in fact, this applicant does work there. You know, if you've got a paycheck stub, you can probably call the supervisor in that case and just, you know, see how the applicant is, you know, they show up on time. One of my favorite questions has always been, I have a client, the last question that he asks is, hey, listen, if I can't get this house ready for Bob, could he and his family come stay with you for a couple days? And he stops and just waits. So just a tip. Another thought is, and oftentimes it's not something that we do anymore out in the world. And that's reach out and touch someone. But it sure would be nice, at least in my opinion, if as you're getting that your investment property ready, or getting that whatever it is you've got for lease, you know, getting it ready, you might knock on the door of the person or the folks that you know are on either side, or maybe you already know them, and just check on them, make sure they're okay, give them a gift card to someplace. Those things go a long way. I'd rather have a phone call, I guess, in the middle of the night that somebody is stealing all of the appliances and everything from the house than to find out a month later when the rent's not paid and they've absolutely stripped the entire place, that something's happening. You know, again, gift card, just something nice to do for the neighbors, and also getting to know people in your community is not a bad thing. It's in fact a great thing. So I've seen some of these changes. In fact, I meant to change the slide to $10 to $295 because there's some application fees out in Florida that are insane. But that's what they charge. But anyhow, applicants know they're going to be charged an application fee. Make sure you're charging it. It doesn't have anything to do with how low the amount of money might be or how high it is. It's simply involving them in the entire process. You can't go to the bank and say, hey, I want to borrow some money, and they want nothing from you. If you can, hold that thought. If you can, let me know. I know a lot of folks interested in doing that too. So again, applicants know they're going to be charged an application fee, and make sure you're charging them, at least covering your costs. Now for some changes. One thing that just happened in Seattle, I just read the article this morning, is that they've just ruled against landlords, and you can no longer charge. Well, they've ruled against landlords in the amount of money they can charge for deposits, and they also now require you to give them 6 months to pay that deposit. So, again, if you've got much experience in this business, and you're allowing an applicant to break up a deposit, that's a sure way to never get your full deposit, or an applicant to stay the entire length of the lease. But anyhow, just some changes, and this, like I said, this is ever evolving. There's some things going on in Colorado right now. Always in California, there's something new going. Oregon's got rent control, or they're pushing rent control. If you're a landlord in the state of Oregon and you give your resident a no fault eviction, meaning I don't have to give you a cause, just I need you to leave. You know, you've now got to pay their relocation up to $5,000. That's just a requirement, so they can move wherever they want to move, and you're paying for that move, $5,000. They're fighting it, but it's an uphill battle right now. Washington State, they're restricting the use of criminal information, as I kind of mentioned before. and they're now looking at source of income restrictions, meaning that they're forcing some state assistance programs on landlords, whether they like it or not. California, this has been going on for about a year now, but you now have to wait for 90 days after you receive the judgment to report that eviction filing. So by that point, that resident's already moved in somewhere else, maybe twice, and done the same thing. Just moved in, didn't pay, skipped out again and again. And then finally, talking about Washington State, Washington D.C. is also looking into the use of criminal background checks, and also there are some states looking into and trying to ban the use of sex offender data in the screening process as well. One other thing to mention that I don't think we have on the slides here, there is a bill, a federal bill called the Tenant Protection Act. It's looking to change the way that screening is done completely, and it hasn't gone anywhere so far, knock on wood, but it's there. It's I think it's Senate Bill 1758. It's either 1758, it could be 1768, but it's there. Take a look at it, see where things are, where they're trying to push things. And again, any questions at all about any of this, I'd be happy to talk to you or email you any additional information, etc. So. A couple of questions. Does NTN have the ability to screen applicants that are not from the USA? First of all, you shouldn't be asking that question. My opinion says that's a fair housing violation and national origin being the reason, but the answer is yes. And I'll restate that question with, does NTN have the capability of screening someone without a social security number, maybe, or who refuses to give you their social security number? And the answer still is yes. Can I give a copy of the reports to the applicant? No. You can show it to them, you can talk to them about it, but you cannot give them a copy of the reports. That is an FCRA violation. FCRA is governed by this little teeny agency called the FTC. You might have heard of it, and seems like not a big deal, but there are means for an applicant to get a copy of his or her report. And last but not least, are all screening agencies, companies, the same? The answer is no. I jokingly mentioned if we are, there ought to be a review process, and NTN actually has a review process, like I mentioned. When we get a John Smith or any other common name, we have a process we call NTN Review. It is our quality assurance product. It allows us to break down all the John Smiths out there and all the criminal records and eviction records. And before we report them, we're confirming whether or not this is in fact your applicant. And it's not something we do because we have some secret private investigators on our teams, because being a private investigator doesn't give you any other additional access to information that's well, I should say that's lawfully available in this case, but doesn't give you any additional access to any better information than we have. And because we control our own data, we've got better data than anyone else does anyhow. So the answer is we're not all the same. If you're not an NTN client, I would invite you to give NTN a look. So just some action items for you to think about. And if you don't have criteria, develop it. If you need some help, give me a call, shoot me an email, I'll help you. Or I'll get you in touch with your local office, and your local office would be happy to help you as well. Make sure you're going over the IDs and the Social Security cards. Seeing more and more. I just read an article today that fraud in the online application process today is on the steady rise. People more and more, again, we're not meeting them face to face anymore, so they're someone who they really are, and it's at this point, it's it's really the percentage-wise, it's increasing very, very steadily and very, very quickly. So be on the lookout for that. Screen your applicants, whether you're using NTN or not. We certainly hope that you're using NTN, but if you're not, screen with someone. I once before a radio program, I was presented with a percentage, and that percentage was that roughly 2/3 of or 66%, I guess if you want to use a percentage, but 2/3 of all real estate professionals take the application fee and do zero background checking. And I get questions like this all the time. Well, why do these applicants who, have been evicted from the last 3 places they've lived and they have a criminal record that goes on for pages, why did they even bother to apply? I showed them my criteria, and that's why, because they've kind of been trained that look nice, say the right things, and convince that landlord. Guess what? You don't need to screen me. I'm great. I'm going to take good care of this house, and that's just kind of the way it happens. So again, use a screening company. Do screening. For those of you that have if there's anybody that has a multifamily property, this economic loss is it's pretty interesting. You'd be surprised to see how much you truly are losing based on a few factors. We could do it on a single family house, but it doesn't work. It's not a big enough not enough data to basically analyze. But for those of you that's got an offer here, roughly by October the 1st, we'd love to present the loss to you, and it lets you, again, it basically just takes the evictions and skips and puts it into taking national numbers, just showing you what you're actually losing. And I've never put one together before, presented to an owner or to some supervisor, and them not like want to run out the door and throw it away so nobody sees it. So happy to do that for you, and appreciate everybody coming today. And again, if there's no questions, then I guess it's time to wrap up, and everybody enjoy their day.
Hey, Mike, we do have a question.
Have some questions.
We do.
Good.
So the question is, what is the process to screen someone that has a credit freeze?
Okay, great question. And basically, the credit freeze needs to be removed. So today, most people have a ready, easy means to unclick a button or click a button to freeze it back. So once we're notified that the applicant is frozen, you'll be notified. Tell the applicant, have the applicant unfreeze. Notify us again it's been unfrozen, and the process is confirmed or completed. Excuse me.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. All right. It looks like that was the end of our questions.
All righty. Well, again, thanks for coming, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, if you have any other topics you'd like to see us have a guest on that you're interested in hearing from on some other topic, let us know, because we're going to start looking to include others in the talks and those kinds of things. So again, thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great day, everyone.